Mr. Tangarelli, before we start the second panel, when the ranking member gets here, were you able to hear the entire earlier proceedings? Thank you. Thank you. Just be a moment. The committee will now come to order. Our second panel is the acting administrator of the General Service Administration, Mr. Daniel M. Tangarelli. Mr. Tangarelli was kind enough to call me almost immediately after his appointment, and we look forward to your opening statement and, in light of the first panel, and you're listening to that, your comments on changes you anticipate. With that, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Issa.
I apologize. I've got to stick with the script. Pursuant to the rules, all members will be sworn. Would you please rise? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Let the record reflect the witness answered in the affirmative. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. And good afternoon, Chairman Issa, Ranking Member Cummings, and members of the committee. My name is Dan Tangarelli, and I am the Acting Administrator of the U.S. General Services Administration. I appreciate the opportunity to come before the committee today. First and foremost, I want to state that the waste and abuse outlined in the Inspector General's report is an outrage and completely antithetical to the goals of the Administration. The report details violations of travel rules, acquisition rules, and good conduct. Just as importantly, those responsible violated rules of common sense, the spirit of public service, and the trust that the American taxpayers have placed in us. I speak for the overwhelming majority of GSA staff when I say that we are shocked, appalled, and deeply disappointed by these indefensible actions as you are. We have taken strong action against those officials who are responsible and will continue to do so where appropriate. I intend to uphold the highest ethical standards at this agency, including referring any criminal activity to appropriate law enforcement officials and taking any action that is necessary and appropriate. If we find irregularities, I will immediately engage GSA's Inspector General. As indicated in the joint letter that Inspector General Brian Miller and I sent to all GSA staff, we expect an employee who sees waste, fraud, or abuse to report it. We want to build a partnership with the IG, while respecting their independence, that will ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. There will be no tolerance for employees who violate or in any way disregard these rules. I believe this is critical, not only because we owe it to the American taxpayers, but also because we owe it to the many GSA employees who work hard, follow the rules, and deserve to be proud of the agency for which they work. We have also taken steps to improve internal controls and oversight. Already, I have canceled all future Western Regions conferences. I have also canceled 35 previously planned conferences, saving nearly $1 million in taxpayer expenses. I have suspended the hats-off stores and have already demanded reimbursement from Mr. Peck, Mr. Shepard, and Mr. Neely for private in-room parties. I have canceled most travel through the end of the fiscal year agency-wide, and I am centralizing budget authority and have already centralized procurement oversight for regional offices to make them more directly accountable. I look forward to working in partnership with this committee to ensure that there is full accountability for these activities so that we can begin to restore the trust of the American people. I hope that in so doing, GSA can refocus on its core mission, saving taxpayers' money by efficiently procuring supplies, services, and real estate, and effectively disposing of unneeded government property. We believe that there has rarely been a time of greater need for these services and the savings they bring to the government and the taxpayer. There is a powerful value proposition to a single agency dedicated to this work, especially in these austere fiscal times. We need to ensure we get back to basics and conduct this work better than ever. At GSA, our commitment is to our public service, our duty, and our nation, and not to conferences, awards, or parties. The unacceptable, inappropriate, and possibly illegal activities at the Western Regions Conference stand in direct contradiction to the express goals of this agency and the administration, and I am committed to ensuring that we take whatever steps are necessary to hold responsible parties accountable and to make sure that this never happens again. We need to focus this agency on the basics, streamlining the administrative work of the Federal Government to save taxpayers' money. I look forward to working with the committee moving forward, and I welcome the opportunity to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. I recognize myself. I'll start with one question. Do you know if the administration plans on putting you up promptly to the Senate for confirmation?
I have not talked to anyone about plans beyond my time coming over as acting administrator.
Well, I appreciate that. I want to make sure the record is clear that the earlier panel made it very clear that a series of acting administrators was part of the lack of continuity of control that in no small part led to, if you will, Ms. Johnson receiving an agency that was already, to a certain extent, in trouble. So hopefully that at OMB and OPM and at the White House, that's all being heard as we speak. I appreciate the fact that, for the record, you embraced a number of recommendations, but would you have exception to any of the recommendations from the Inspector General, realizing Ms. Johnson had already embraced all of the recommendations for change?
No. In fact, the Inspector General and I met on the first day to talk about the report and to talk about building a strong rapport going forward so that we wouldn't have any such situations develop like this again.
The Inspector General made us aware that there were, in his answers to our questions, that there were ongoing investigations, including ones that fall on much more in the nature of corruption, meaning kickbacks, perhaps bribes and the like. Would you commit to us today to ensure that both the Chairman and Ranking Member be informed in sufficient specificity to understand the gravity of events, if not necessarily all the details of possible criminal indictments?
To the extent that I can do that in working with the Inspector General, I'd be happy to work with the committee on those issues.
We appreciate that. No small matter. My ego can take not knowing about something. What I can't do is deny the Ranking Member and myself the possibility of looking for fundamental changes in yours and other agencies in a prompt period of time. We think in 2-year increments or less, and would like to make sure that we don't have 2 years go by without that. You were previously Senate confirmed, so the expectation of this committee is that if you're promptly put up, you'd be promptly confirmed again. So hopefully that message is delivered. You've listened to the testimony of the previous panel, including the frustrations of your predecessor, for more than 2 hours. Do you feel that you would be able to resolve the issues that your predecessor was unable to resolve? And I would particularly question, do you have confidence in the team you now have in place, obviously sans the 2 that were dismissed?
Well, I intend to conduct a top-to-bottom review of the organization. As a new person coming in, particularly in these circumstances, I have to have confidence in the people I have, but I also have to have that confidence demonstrated. I have to have a sense of how we've structured the organization, how we've put our resources into play, and make sure that that's in fact the way we think we should go forward. Clearly, there were serious gaps, as evidenced by what took place here.
Now, as you know, you have a fairly large amount of Schedule C political appointees that work for you, just as you are a political appointee. When you were appointed acting, were you given the full ability to clean house, to determine political appointees you would keep and those that you would ask to be replaced?
I believe when I was appointed acting, I was given full latitude to make managerial decisions over the General Services Administration.
I appreciate that, but my question was a little more nuanced. The President has placed a number of political appointees from your Chief of Staff on down. Were you given the ability, or do you believe you have the ability, to retain or to dismiss any or all of those individuals you find not to meet the standards necessary going forward for what you envision to be a predictable GSA that's cleaned up and that this sort of thing never happens again?
At the time, I never had a discussion specifically about that, but I did ask if I was going to have full authority to make recommendations on how we should structure the agency going forward, and that I was given assurance I would.
Your predecessor showed a considerable frustration, both the Chairman and the Ranking Member, seemingly on 2 areas. The SESs that were paid a lot of money and, in fact, may not have performed well, and even in the case of Mr. Neely, are still being paid by the taxpayers, and the political appointees who made significantly less than those individuals. Do you share that frustration?
I, again, need to understand the reason why we have the GSA structure that we do. And in the sense that I heard the description from my predecessor, I understand the nature of her frustration. But I would like to know why we have the structure we have and see if there are ways that we can make it better.
The GSA has been successful in has the GSA been successful in recovering any money so far from individuals who received benefits that were not warranted, either the individuals who made the decisions of spending money or those who accepted them?
We began that process late last week, so I don't think we've received any money back at this time.
How much are you hoping to receive back for the taxpayers?
Right now, we have the case of the 3 individuals we've sought reimbursement for the private in-room parties. We also have the contractor that charged us for hotel rooms when they were actually getting hotel rooms from GSA. I want to work very closely with Brian Miller and go through the entire bill of particulars and see how much of that we can get back.
Our indication is that approximately $100,000 was spent. This is an egregious amount, but when you break it down, one of the most egregious portions were the 10 FAM trips, the 10 trips that included other luxury hotels on the Strip and so on that were visited by both individuals and their families. Will you seek to get any of that part of that money back from the individuals who had their vacations with their family paid for by the taxpayers?
I'll work closely with Inspector General Miller to make sure that to the extent that any funds are recoverable, we will recover them.
Would you commit to us, if you find that you cannot recover because statute doesn't allow for it, to inform us? Because ultimately, one of the reforms that I believe the Chairman, in my role, and the Ranking Member, and all of us on the committee want to do is make sure you're empowered when people receive something they're not entitled to make sure the statute allows it to be clawed back.
I will commit to working with the committee and sharing with you where I've succeeded and where I've had less success.
Lastly, you're inheriting a organization that had other problems. Some of the members that were here earlier have worked on it. I know the Ranking Member in his role over at Transportation and Infrastructure, Ms. Norton in her role over there, have been frustrated for a very long time that there's a huge amount of waste within the management and disposal of Federal property. That's not the subject of this hearing, but it will continue to be the subject of both individual and joint hearings by T&I and this committee. So I would hope you'd be prepared as quickly as possible to address those issues, because they're going to be of billion-dollar concerns to us. Lastly, so far we've been able to get from the Inspector General a pretty good production of documents. He's been very cooperative. Would you also commit to make sure that we get documents, preferably in electronic format and organized, pursuant to our request?
I think to date we've provided nearly 50,000 documents to the committee. We had the initial request came in just about this time last week, so we've been working day and night and through the weekend to try to provide the committee with all the documents we can.
Well, as I turn it over to the Ranking Member, I would like this to be an example of how it doesn't take months or a year to get document production. So far, the work from the GSA has been excellent, and that was the reason for the question, but also for a comment that it has been good so far. With that, I recognize the Ranking Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm hopeful, Mr. Chairman, that we can bring Mr. Tangellini back and Mr. Miller for some periodic checkups as to where they are with regard to what they're doing, because I just don't want to. I want us to make sure we stay on top of this.
Oh, I have no doubt we'll have several hearings of this sort going forward on a joint basis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tangellini, you shared your plan to review the previous conferences as well as the controversial Hats Off program that awarded electronic cameras and iPods to GSA employees. The Hats Off program has been suspended pending your review. I understand that you also closed all other award programs. Is that correct?
all other similar award programs in which points were given to employees that they could then turn in for prizes or awards.
And how did that start? Do you know?
I really don't know, and that's part of what I'm trying to understand. What I'd like to do is look at things like these award programs and ask ourselves, where did they come from? What purpose do they serve? Is there some good underlying them? What contractual agreements do we have with our employees related to them? So we've suspended them. It's part of the top-to-bottom review to really get to the bottom of where it came from.
And what will be done with the inventory remaining in those award programs?
Well, for the time being, I've asked them to hold and suspend the inventory pending a decision on whether we move forward on the program. If we move forward on the program, it could be reused. If we don't, we're in charge of disposal of Federal property, so we'd find a way to dispose of it properly.
And what type of awards programs, if any, do you feel are appropriate, if any?
Well, I think that that's one of the things we have to look at, is ask ourselves, is our bonus and award program tied to the appropriate outcomes and the appropriate types of performance? GSA is about savings, so we should really find ways that we can reemphasize savings within the GSA mission.
Now, you heard the testimony of the former administrator and the fact that I think just about all the members on the dais very concerned about, and I think it was probably one of the weak parts of her testimony, that whole issue of the $9,000 bonus. And she explained the process by which one thing was separate from another thing. I mean, how do you deal with that? Because I think if there's anything, I remember when we had AIG and all these companies giving bonuses for bad behavior, I was very loud, and sometimes loud by myself, but and very upset about it. I think when you got bad actors, the last thing you want to do is to give them bonuses. The public doesn't understand it, and even if there's a two-track process, and that's the impression that I got, is the two tracks here, some kind of way we don't want, as you go about the business of trying to reestablish this trust, you don't want the public to be confused about folks going out there and partying with their money and at the same time getting a bonus. I mean, it's like slapping them in the face. So I'm just wondering what are your plans with regard to that? Have you talked about it? Have you studied it? I mean, I know it's early on, but tell me, I mean, is that something that's GSA-wide, Federal government-wide? I'm just wondering.
I had some of these responsibilities overseeing the human capital operations at the Treasury Department in my role as Assistant Secretary of Management. And I have to say that I have a slight disagreement. I believe that the process actually gives the administrator more authority. And so one of the things we'll need to do is make sure, as we look at how we manage performance, that we should look at the conversations we're having with the IG, and if there are any issues out there, and maybe put these things on hold if there are big questions out there.
I talked about reestablishing trust, but it seems as if, when I look at what happened here, it seems as if there may have been rules that were just totally disregarded. And that concerns me because, and particularly when you've got rules that are being disregarded, and not only being disregarded, but then you have folks making videos about how they're disregarding them, which is incredible to me. Right. And basically saying, the hell with those people who are supposed to be over the oversight. I mean, this seems kind of deep. It seems like you got to dig deep to get into some of this. I don't know if this is just some surface stuff. So I'm just trying to figure out, how do you get to that? Well, now, I don't know if, were you in here for the administrator's testimony?
Yes, I saw the testimony.
All right. And did you hear my last question, sir, with regard to, it seems as if the administrator's here,
right,
but then there's all this stuff going on that seems to have a disconnect. And so, I mean, talk to me.
So what I've found in just the short time I've been there, and it's only been about 2 weeks now, that it seems obvious to me that there is a disconnect between the headquarters and the regional operations. And to some extent, we need to build a stronger connection at a separation of duties level. So the Chief Financial Officer, I've asked that the Chief Financial Officer of the GSA serve as the Chief Financial Officer straight down into the regions so that we have visibility into the way that regions are designing their budgets and, more importantly, spending their budgets. And I think that that's one of the things as we conduct a top-to-bottom review of GSA, we can ask ourselves some questions. Why are we structured this way? Is this the best way to provide accountability and oversight? And if not, we should change it.
Well, I really wish you well as you go forward. And I, too, agree with the Chairman that we have seen what the failure to have somebody in that position permanently can do. And we need to do that, and I'm hoping that the President will nominate you or somebody capable of addressing these issues, and then the Senate will move on to confirmation as soon as possible. Thank you very much. And if there's anything that we can do to be supportive of your efforts, please don't fail to call on us.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman from Maryland. The Chair will now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we saw earlier in the day the GSA mission statement. Are you looking at revising that, or are you thinking we're all right with what it is?
Well, I think as part of a top-to-bottom review, we should start with the mission statement and the goals. I haven't been there long enough to say whether this is the exact right one or the exact wrong one. It seems to hit many of the key points of savings and efficiency, economy, effectiveness. So I want to make sure that even if we were to change it, that we wouldn't lose those important parts.
Right, and it would be your belief that in general it's the GSA's job to get the best deal for the government and efficiently manage what the government has. So that,
absolutely,
just broad general terms. And part of that would be taking care of tax dollars as if they were your own, or more so almost as if they were being held in trust.
Absolutely.
Great, great. Now, the title of this hearing was, do we have a culture problem within the GSA or within the broader government? And I have to say, I've worked with a lot of great government employees. I've worked with some that aren't so great. Do you think this is a cultural problem, or do you think this is more of a cancer?
Well, I think we definitely had a cultural problem in Region 9, probably tied to a leadership problem. But I can't say that I know enough about GSA to say whether we do or do not have a cultural problem across the organization when it comes to these issues. I will point out, though, I've received dozens and dozens of emails from GSA employees who are every bit as outraged, every bit as angry about what took place here.
Well, it's my hope that this is a cancer and we're going to be able to excise it from wherever it exists, be it in the GSA or any other government agency. And I think this committee has already started investigating the spending habits of some government agencies. I did want to touch on one other point with regard to the acquisition of services. In his report, the IG identified a number of problems. In fact, this isn't the first report by Mr. Miller that's raised concern about GSA acquisitions officers disclosing competitor pricing or the maximum price. And GSA officials have failed to abide by small business set-asides, failed to properly publish offerings, and omitted important federal acquisition regulations clauses which protect the government. Do you think this is intentional misconduct, or you think this is just ignorance or poor training?
I'm not sure what it was in this case, but I can tell you that I think it's unacceptable. And I can tell you that I think the GSA should be held to a higher standard. We should hold ourselves to a higher standard. And one of the actions I've taken most recently is to centralize in our senior procurement official, our senior procurement executive, the ability to grant or withdraw warrants. Warrants are the ability to actually make procurement actions. So I think we have to take a good, strong look at how we do things, how we set ourselves up, what our standards are, what our performance is, how do we create structures of accountability, and hopefully we can make the improvements to make sure that nothing like this can happen again.
And members of Congress have district offices where they hear complaints and problems from constituents. And Just in the past few months, there have been an alarming number of folks who have complained about the government contracting process, not just with the GSA, but other agencies. And you ought to be able to walk away feeling like you were treated fairly by the government. As a former small business owner, I know it takes a lot of time and, in many cases, thousands of dollars to prepare a proposal, especially for a government agency. And to have your bid disclosed to a competitor, or to have your bid when it was the lowest passed over, is very frustrating to people, and ends up, especially in the case of smaller businesses, you just throw up your hands. You don't have the money to go hire a government contracting attorney. You just walk away and say, I'm done with the government. And you end up with good people who could offer products and services at a better cost, just refusing to go through the red tape. So I look forward to the GSA making that a priority to educate not just their own contracting officers, but the other government agencies that the GSA trains through the Federal Acquisition Institute. And I would appreciate your commitment to make that part of your agenda.
Well, I appreciate that. I think you're right that government contracting isn't always easy, but it should be fair.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
The Chair thanks the gentleman from Texas and now recognizes the gentlelady from the District of Columbia, Ms. Holmes Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tangolini, I must say that I welcome the President's decision to bring you to the GSA, because I'm very familiar with your own record as, if you will forgive me, something of a turnaround agent in government because of the tough post you have had. First, the President simply takes out the top of the agency, including the administrator who may not have been conversant with what was happening below, and he had to do that. That's the way things like this are done in parliamentary democracies, in Britain and in Asia. But in our country, somehow we go beneath the top and go after someone who had hands-on, as if the top has nothing to do with how the agency is run. So I think that your experience running, you were the operational head of the District of Columbia, running the operations of a big city, and for that matter of the Metropolitan Transit Authority, more than equips you to take on what needs to be done here. And you heard perhaps the administrator speak about how she felt the agency was in need of reforming. Now, I can't imagine that you don't think so as well. It may be that you can continue what she began. It may be that you have a different vision. But let me give you a specific example, because it really involves a chain of command. There was a question asked by one of our colleagues on the other side that I thought was very good, which is how did Mr. Neely get a hold of this pot of money in the first place that looked like he regarded as his own? And actually, it wasn't ever answered, at least to my satisfaction. It looks like Mr. Neely was in charge of Mr. Neely. So let me ask you about how decentralized this agency is and whether it is decentralized to a fault. There's one theory of management, which is, I think, a very efficacious one, that goes that if you delegate to managers hands-on responsibility, you can hold them accountable and they become more creative. When you get a situation like this, one has to ask about whether or not the agency has any chain of command. If for important issues like spending, the administrator at the top and the chief of staff can sit here and say, well, I don't know anything about it. One wonders whether this agency is simply run at the regional level with Washington having no responsibility for holding the regions accountable. So I'd like you to discuss what you think of the chain of command now, if you think it is too decentralized, if you think its operations and its budget. I think you said something about the CFO, but whether in general this agency has simply allowed itself to be run as if there were, 11 regions running one agency.
I think autonomy is incredibly important if you're going to allow managers to innovate. But autonomy without accountability can lead to the kind of situations we find here. And what we're interested in—
For example, did Mr. Neely report to anyone on spending, or was he the final, the check on spending, including his own spending?
I don't exactly understand the nature of the reporting structure that Mr. Neely was operating under at the time. I can tell you my concern is that the Financial Management Office of the Public Building Service was autonomous from the Chief Financial Officer, that each of the different authorities, each of the different regions had authority over their own budget within the region, and so they had autonomy over the administration of those budgets. We even found in trying to get the records that it's very hard to get the records from the regions of the actual spending. And so early on, we think the quickest thing we can do to make sure that we have a stronger sense of accountability to avoid this kind of problem from happening again in the near term and going forward is to centralize the authority over the financial management of the agency within the agency chief financial officer and make each one of those service and regional financial managers report up to that chief financial officer. We're now going to have to build the appropriate data systems, the data collection systems. We're going to have to build the appropriate budget oversight, but that appeared to be missing.
Could I ask you a question about the hats off? GSA procures for Federal agencies, doesn't it? I mean, if you want to order something, you order through the GSA. Can it be that this program, where they awarded electronic cameras and iPods and the like, got out of hand because GSA ran the procurement of these electronic devices, and with little oversight from the top, simply regarded these stores as something that grew on its own, as something that they could use to award to their own employees? Well, how does, in other words, I'm looking for the link between their own procurement authority and using that authority within the agency for its own employees in a way that I have never seen done in Federal agencies elsewhere.
So from what I understand, and this is from the IG report, Mr. Miller's report on the Hats Off program, that was focused with the electronic equipment, the GPSs, was focused around Region 9 and just Region 9.
Yeah, I'm talking about Region 9.
Right. The broader program operated throughout the agency. From what I also understand, what was going on in Region 9 was that they were violating simply if not the procurement rules, they were violating the personnel rules and the limit you could give for any one special act type award in that regard. So I think that the rules actually are in place. What we had was a case of people simply ignoring them.
I just wonder, if you're going to give out valuable, much wanted things like iPods and other electronic equipment, it seems to me there ought to be, somebody ought to have done something pretty wonderful in the agency. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady from the District of Columbia. The Chair will now recognize himself for questioning. Mr. Tangolini, you have a Herculean task ahead of you, which is to restore public trust, not just in GSA. Most folks don't compartmentalize government that way. They just don't have any trust and confidence in really in any of the institutions of government, including those of us sitting on this dais. So it's a big challenge, but it's a fundamental challenge. You have to do it, and far be it for me to tell you how to do your job. I've never ran anything the size of GSA, but I can tell you this: in a little DA's office in Spartanburg County, when we had budget cuts, we suspended all travel. And I would encourage you to do something, not just at the margins, but something to send a message that if it can be done via telephone, it must be done via telephone. If it can be done by video conferencing, I understand, I guess, at some level, team building. I'm not saying I've never been part of a team building exercise. I feel sure I have. I don't remember enjoying it, but I remember been to different conferences where they did it. But these are really austere times, and for folks watching who really are struggling, it's hard for them to understand what they've heard today or what they've read about this conference. So, and let me ask you this, starting off. If one of the folks we work for, one of our fellow citizens or a government employee is aware of waste, fraud, abuse, personal gain, is there a repository? I mean, they don't have access to the Inspector General. How would just an ordinary citizen or an ordinary government employee that sees waste, fraud, and abuse and wants to correct it, to whom would they report it?
Well, I know this committee has a website in which they can report these things, but actually a private citizen can report waste, fraud, and abuse that they think is related to GSA to the GSA IG by going to www.gsaig.gov. We also have fraudnet@gsaig.gov, and that's an email address people can use. And the GSA IG has a phone number, 800-424-5210. And we encourage anyone who sees anything that they think is untoward about GSA activity to reach out to the IG.
Well, thank you for that. And, you know, Mr. Cummings raised a pretty provocative point, I thought, which is, and so did Mr. Farenthold, where's the line between nuances that need more training and just a character deficiency? Because, honestly, some of what happened in this conference, there's no training in the world that's going to fix that. It's just a character flaw. So from a hiring standpoint or a retention standpoint, if you're having to train someone that they can't go to a hotel employee and ask for a discount on a personal purse or pocketbook, it just strikes me that there's no training in the world that's going to fix that. So there has to be a moral component to it. How do you address that from your position?
Well, I think it starts at it's a leadership requirement. And it means that you have to have strong messages coming from the top, and that's why in the first week, meeting with the Inspector General, we agreed to send a joint letter to all GSA staff and tell everyone that we have an expectation that they will raise alarm or concern if they see something they think is untoward. GSA employees are the most skilled employees for understanding the travel rules, the procurement rules, the acquisition rules. So they should be the ones who are the easiest ones to recognize when something is wrong. And so I think we have to start with strong leadership, and then we have to make sure that our leaders are actually sending the leaders in the regions, the leaders throughout the organization are also sending a similar message. But we also have to encourage employees to come forward and say it's okay to come forward if you see something wrong, because that's the way we can catch these things before they spin out of control and happen the way this one did.
I have time for one more specific question, so I will end it on this. Most folks reading about this, watching on the news, are struggling with whether or not they're going to be able to go on vacation this summer. The thought of going on a scouting trip to figure out whether or not they like the condo or the beach house or the amusement park has never entered their mind. Was this a question of people exceeding their jurisdiction, their subject matter jurisdiction, if you will, from a legal standpoint, or was it an abuse of discretion? I mean, is there really the power to say, I need to go 4 or 5 times to scout a series of 4-star hotels? So is it totally outside their jurisdiction, or was it just an abuse of discretion? Because most of us were surprised to learn that you would have the authority to abuse, to have multiple scouting trips when everything is available. I mean, virtual online tours, word of mouth. So which is it? Is it a discretion issue or a power issue?
I may not be the best person to answer that question. I can tell you what we've done. And what we've done is centralize our travel and conference approval process in our Chief Administrative Officer's office. Now, we don't think we're going to get in the way of anyone doing important and valuable travel and training by simply asking that they come to the front office, they come to the GSA headquarters, and make a case for what it is exactly they're doing. And then hopefully, if this kind of thing begins to happen, we can see a pattern and we can stop it before it goes any further. Frankly, I think that people know when they're being watched and that they have to make a case and they have to document it, that will in part stop this behavior.
Well, my time is up. On behalf of all of us, thank you for your testimony today. We honestly, earnestly wish you well. I don't know you, not because I want you to personally do well, but because for us to make it as a republic, you have to do well. We have to do well. We can't survive with people not having confidence in the institutions of government. We just won't make it. So on behalf of all of us, thank you and good luck.
Thank you.
With that, the hearing is adjourned.